Okay, we are live with Francis Pouliot. Francis, thank you for doing this. I was just seeing your background and I was joking with you that you're in a much better location than I'm in right now. So can you just give everyone just, I don't know, brief background? We're going to get into BullBitcoin and like all the background of BullBitcoin in a little bit, but who are you and where are you right now?
Yeah, so I'll start with where I am. I live in Costa Rica. I left Canada in the summer of 2020. Specifically because of the lockdown and of the COVID regulations and rules that were happening in Canada. I haven't been back since, and I'm very happy about this decision. I grew up in Montreal. I'm a Quebecer through and through. However, the vibe in Montreal and just Canadian big cities is just terrible. Everybody seems to be demotivated, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are vilified. And the culture is very collectivist. And out here, I live in the jungle. It's a very free place. Entrepreneurship is thriving over here. There's a lot of expats. There's an incredible amount of Canadians that live down here. I don't know how many people left Canada since the lockdowns, but just based on my personal observation, there are literally thousands and thousands of Canadians that moved from from Canada to Costa Rica. And when you ask someone like, how long have you lived here? The answer is always the same. It's like, yeah, I came here during 2020. So I like to say I'm a COVID refugee down here in Canada.
Just on that note, one of our real estate lawyers who does a lot of real estate stuff, his client base, he had 0% of his clients a few years ago working on files to leave Canada. Now, 5% of his client base is all on files that he's helping people leave Canada.
Yeah.
So this is a new phenomenon that looks like it's continuing.
Yeah, and it's not just like the COVID lockdowns and the cost of living. It's also like raising a family in Canada. To me, sounds very sketchy, very dangerous. I'm not at all a fan of the culture in public schools. I'm not a fan of. I know people that have been interrogated by child protection services because of the political opinions that they posted on Facebook and so on and so forth. So it just doesn't seem like a great place to raise a family. And that's why I came down here. And down here, homeschooling is very common. You have excellent alternative private schools. It's very family focused. Everybody's very based. People here are they're not like conservatives, but they're like very anti-establishment. So you'll have people are into homesteading, growing their own food, eating healthy organic foods, distrusting big pharma and so on and so forth. So there's a really cool culture of like expats that are anti-establishment that came to establish themselves here. So you have also here, like out in the jungle, a sense of community living that you don't get in Canada at all. Knowing your neighbor is very important. Life here is hard. I mean, I wouldn't living in the jungle in Costa Rica is not easy. It's difficult. Your vehicle's always breaking down. Sourcing excellent food is not extremely easy. You need to have like connections. It can be a little dangerous living out here. So it's very important for people to foster this sense of community, which I really like. So it's kind of like living in the countryside in a small town where everybody knows each other. But it's very cool. And I recommend people, definitely check out Costa Rica. Costa Rica, by the way, it's not a cheap place to live, especially if you live in one of those expat towns. Like Mexico is far cheaper and El Salvador is far cheaper, and South America, Costa Rica is a very expensive actually place to live. Real estate here is very expensive. Rent is crazy expensive. So don't come to Costa Rica for saving money necessarily. If you want to come to Costa Rica, it's for freedom.
And you're living in the jungle. So is it also expensive to live in the jungle? And what does that mean? You have a house that you found that's like off the beaten path, not in one of the expat communities, I assume?
Well, I mean, most of the expats that I know do not live in the capital city of Costa Rica, San Jose. San Jose is not at all a nice place to live. It's like a very sprawled out, like it's a very big urban area. There's not a lot of culture. It's not like living in Buenos Aires or Mexico City, like at all. It's everybody kind of lives on either kind of like a beachside community or like a mountainside community. So, the area that I'm in is the southwest coast of Costa Rica. and it's about a 50-kilometer kind of radius where people just like have kind of like houses. It's kind of like, the northern Canada kind of, like
Got it.
imagine
Yep.
like Muskoka kind of area where you're going to have like a big, nice country house and there's like a small town center somewhere. So people live off of the beaten path. There's no major city down here.
Do you see any Canadians going down there that are starting like a business to support themselves, or are most Canadians going down with some wealth so they can kind of live and survive without really doing any new work?
There's two types. There's obviously like the digital nomad type, people like myself who have an online job. They're going to be, programmers, graphic designers. Maybe they have a drop shipping business or something like that, and they are sustaining them. Like I'm doing the same exact job that I was doing in my office in Canada. Like my work has not changed at all. Even when I had an office in Canada, I would get my staff to come in like, twice a week for meetings and stuff like that. But most of the time we were working from home. So you have like this digital nomad kind of type. And then of course, a lot of the tourism businesses here are run by expats. So that's going to be like restaurants. A lot of people are doing Airbnb. That's very, very common. So people come down here. They notice that there is an incredible demand for living out here in the jungle in the middle of nowhere. Very, very little housing. Most of the housing is, we call them like Tico houses, and it's not very derogative. It's kind of like a common phrase. A Tico house is basically kind of like a very minimalistic shack. Usually it's like one story with a couple of rooms, and it's not like a modern 2 or 3 story house with a pool and stuff like that. So a lot of expats are coming down here. They're buying Tico houses and remodeling them, or they're buying land and building Airbnbs. So it's a very heavily tourism dependent area. So real estate is actually down here is actually the main kind of like the main driver, and like just construction and real estate generally in Costa Rica is like probably the biggest economic driver. And it's interesting because down here in Costa Rica, especially like in the countryside, the land is amazing and fertile, and it's also close to the beach, and the climate is just perfect. So it's not, there's no like dangerous animals down here. There's no like dangerous snakes and shit like that. You have an idea of like the jungle as being like super dangerous, but it's actually very mild. I'm in the rainy season right now. I'm like peak rainy season. And as you can tell, it's very sunny. So the climate's really nice. And a lot of the land here was very, very poor people were owning like 1,000 acres of land down here. In the 70s, there was a big push by the Costa Rican government to get people out of the cities to go farm and create cattle ranches to export beef to the United States. So you have these gigantic farms, and like now all of these local farmers, they're selling off their land for millions of dollars. So there's kind of like a gold rush right now to buy property down here. And there's a lot of space. So it's very, very nice. And the real estate market, so driven by the COVID expats that left. There's a lot of Europeans also. I see a lot of Germans and French people that are like telling me like, they're scared of World War III. First of all, they're scared of war with Russia. They're scared of not having the food supply chain disrupted. So like a lot of people have homesteads, like buy 20 acres, and here, you can grow fruits very easily. You can eat very well with a homestead. You can be fully self-sustained. So you have a lot of that, and people come down here and then they'll open like bakeries, they'll open restaurants, they're starting import business. So either you're a digital nomad and you come down here, or you come down here and you start, if you have capital, you're going to typically start like an Airbnb business or something like that. You'll buy like, a lot of people buy like 5 to 10 acres, and then they'll build like 6 to 8, homes, and then they'll rent those out for very high rent. I mean, in a coastal town that's close to a surf beach that has, an active yoga community. So, a lot of tourism from Western wealthy types, rents can easily go to like 3,000 US a month for like a big house. And then you'll be able to find something like a small house for like $700. It's possible to find like cheap small house. It's not like Mexico where you'll pay like $200 a month in like a small town. So, buying some house, remodeling it, or building a house and renting it out for $2,000 a month is pretty common. So yeah.
I wonder if I didn't mean to ask you this, but now you got me thinking. I wonder if we're witnessing the very early adoption curve of a complete, change in immigration and movement. Like my parents are both immigrants to Canada. My father's Croatian, my mother's Scottish, both very poor. My father was actually a refugee into Canada. And then, we're born, my brother and I are born there in Canada here. But now it feels like there's another movement of people, and you're the early adoption wave of that movement. If I extrapolate out 50 years, you can almost see like, oh my gosh, like all the new businesses are going to be in a place like Costa Rica or maybe other places like South America. Like I see what's happening in Argentina with that new politician. I forget his name, but I love his hair. You know, the guy I'm talking about who just...
Javier Milei.
Thank you. And so if he gets into power, you can almost extrapolate out 10, 20, 30 years and say, oh my gosh, these countries are the new up and coming countries, and the developed nations as we see them now are the ones on the decline. Most Canadians, I think, are pretty aware of Bitcoin at this point, and they follow the price. Yeah. But what I like about what you share on your Twitter account and the way you talk about Bitcoin, you're talking about buying fruits with Bitcoin and stuff. Can you talk or explain to some Canadians who just follow the price what you see? And we are going to get to BullBitcoin. I am going to get to the BullBitcoin stuff, but what you see in your daily life and what's happening to Bitcoin, and just share that, because I think most Canadians, they don't see this, what you see. And I think it's valuable.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways. There's a lot of use cases for Bitcoin. Okay. So to get back to like when I first started to get into Bitcoin, that was about 10 years ago, early 2013. I started out very ideological and activist minded. I was a libertarian, free market guy. My job was actually I was an economic analyst for the Montreal Economic Institute, which is like a free market libertarian think tank. And I was looking at how to affect change in Canada, how to get Canada away from the socialist model, more towards a free market, libertarian, kind of like society model. That was the explicit objective of the Montreal Economic Institute. And I just got so disappointed and disgruntled and demotivated and depressed at just looking at how to affect change in Canada. I'm like, Canada is never going to change. Like, once you have a socialist kind of policy in place, to reverse it is nearly impossible. It's really easy to get socialism in, to regulate an industry or to nationalize an industry or to add taxes, but to remove those it's like a one-way street. You add regulation and then you cannot ever remove them. I became very, very disgruntled, and I was looking for. I was interested in like, how do I opt out? I will not be able to change the system from within. My initial goal was, okay, I'm going to join kind of like Canadian politics. I was a politics major, and I'm going to try to change the system from the inside, inch by inch, incrementally, to make it more free and more liberal from a free market liberalism perspective. And that just wasn't happening. So I was like, all right, I'm looking for ways to opt out. And that's how I found Bitcoin, and I discovered Austrian economics. So, and I didn't know how money was created. So I studied politics as a bachelor's degree, and then politics as a master's degree. And then I worked for economic think tanks. Wow. And after all of that, I still didn't know how money really was created, because even when you study economics, like back in those days, now it's a little bit more common because of Bitcoin. But back in those days, we didn't talk about central banking at all. Central banks were not public. What they were doing was very, very shadowy and obscure. And then after learning about Bitcoin, I discovered how Canadian dollars and US dollars are created through the central banking system, through debt. And I was like, what the fuck? This is a gigantic scam. And then I started to tie back all of the problems that I was seeing in society could be tied back to the fact that there is an endless money printer that is subsidizing bad decisions, right? And there is endlessly financing governments, right? So governments have this infinite financing mechanism. So they have zero incentive to be decent with the money, because you can always print more money. And this creates, we mentioned before recording, you read the Bitcoin standard. So, as it's very well explained in the Bitcoin standard and the Fiat standard by Safety Nemoos, this creates a lot of horrible incentives and it degrades the culture. It makes everything high time preference. So you'll see the quality of goods decrease over time. The quality of culture decrease over time, the quality of entertainment, and so on and so forth. So all of these problems can be tied back to the creation of money. So I got into Bitcoin initially as an ideological stance. And my thought was, I want to opt out of this system of basically debt slavery, right? So when the government is printing money and borrowing money via printing money or via other forms of debt, it basically creates inflation for the next generations, and it puts the younger generations on the hook to pay back this debt, which they will never be able to repay. It's able to finance socialism, and it's able to finance war. So I want to ideologically opt out from this system. I feel like if I'm holding Canadian dollars, I'm complicit in this system. So I don't want to touch that money. It's like it's unethical money. It's dirty money to me, right? And I want to hold ethical, sound money that doesn't imply any form of violence and that doesn't create. So, when you're holding Bitcoin or when you're creating Bitcoin, it doesn't imply that someone has to give anything to you. There's when you're holding fiat and when you're creating fiat, someone is eventually going to have to pay back for it. With Bitcoin, there's no like debt tied to it from someone else. And with Bitcoin, you're taking on the risk entirely upon yourself. There's no systematic risk in Bitcoin, right? So in the traditional fiat system, if a bank goes down, or banking system collapses, they will straight up just print money to refinance the banks, or they will the central bank will print money and buy bank assets and bank liabilities with it. With Bitcoin, you and this is the money that if you're a person and you're holding government money, you're giving value to this money, which is able to bail out those systems. So it became very ideological to me in the beginning. And then I started to look a little bit more about censorship. So payment censorship and how governments could steer society in a specific direction by censoring some speech and allowing some speech. So the first major event for me was WikiLeaks. So WikiLeaks, for those who don't know, is the organization of Julian Assange. And he was very vocal about the war in Iraq. And he published a video of American soldiers killing some journalists in Iraq. And as a result, his organization, WikiLeaks, was cut off from the banking system. So it was sustained by donations from PayPal and from, bank transfers and whatever, credit cards. And then the government prevented PayPal and all those credit card companies from allowing WikiLeaks to receive donations. But then WikiLeaks started to accept Bitcoin donations and was able to finance its operations exclusively with Bitcoin donations. So I looked at this and I was like, all right, so the ultimate weapon of government to prevent some kind of social change or social movement is to censor those who are talking. And because the internet is open, you can't really censor someone on the internet because they can always run a website, but you can prevent them from getting paid and you can limit their reach by limiting their resources. So Bitcoin was a way for me to stop government censorship. And then so I became very interested in the censorship. I started out interested in the monetary aspect of Bitcoin, the fact that there's only 21 million Bitcoin. To create Bitcoin, you need to expend some proof of work. The amount of Bitcoin created over time is following this logarithmic curve. So I'm assuming that people are kind of familiar with this idea that Bitcoin is sound money. It's limited in supply and you cannot create more of it. But then there's also the transactional aspect of Bitcoin, which is nobody can stop a Bitcoin transaction from taking place. So that was really interesting to me. And then obviously,
which to me is almost the most powerful part of it.
Yeah.
To me, that's the most powerful part of this.
Mm-hmm.
We all talk, and again, in Canada, everyone will talk about the price. Like, what's the fiat Canadian dollar price of Bitcoin? But the fact that you and I can transact directly right now, if we chose to, and no one can stop that, to me, that's just mind blowing. And that's why this thing is like a technology, like a new monetary network that I feel is going to crush the traditional financial system. You know, the way Jeff Booth talks about, like, there's this technology trend here and there's this old system here, and they're kind of fighting each other right now. You can almost just see, just like Skype kind of destroyed a lot of the traditional telephone companies, and just like something like, I don't know if you're familiar with Salesforce.com. I used to work at a company called NetSuite. and they started taking accounting data into the cloud, and they destroyed all the Microsoft technology, which was all desktop based. Yep. And everyone started putting their stuff into the internet, and that destroyed a whole line of older software companies. You can just see that this is yet another technology trend that is now affecting the monetary system. And this one, to me, looks like it's going to take down the entire banking system.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And you know,
I know that might sound crazy. Like you, so and you don't think I'm crazy when I say that. We're obviously, yeah.
No, of course not. There's to touch on this point specifically, there's a certain amount, there's a certain point where you cannot bail out the banks anymore, right? So there's a cycle of bailouts for the banks, and you print money to bail out the banks. But as we've seen in Argentina, if you continue this cycle long enough, then the currency completely loses its value, and you simply do not have the capacity to bail the banks out anymore. And it's kind of like, you know, a bubble that's growing and growing and growing, and you know it's being bailed out continuously by the central bank. And then at some point, the act of creating money is no longer meaningful because the money has lost its value. And you know, a lot of this like censorship resistant stuff and seizure resistant stuff is very theoretical for people until it happens to them, you know, or until it happens to someone they know. So I was fortunate enough to have that experience in 2015. So like 2 years after I got into Bitcoin, I had my PayPal account frozen because I was using my PayPal account to like, I was, you know, doing sending money to exchanges and so on. So I was like connecting my PayPal account to some Bitcoin stuff, and PayPal just froze my account, and I had like, you know, $20,000 in my PayPal account or something like that. And then with an explanation that your account has been deemed like too high risk and like we've frozen your funds, and no explanation as to how I was to unfreeze those funds. They were ultimately locked for 6 months. And then there was no recourse for me to have. Like, I was like, who do I contact? Like PayPal is not even a Canadian company. Like, there's no appeals process to this. There's like, we freeze your account. You can't withdraw it. Go fuck yourself. So that happened to me in 2015. And I was like, oh my God, like the money that I have. And this also happened to me with some Canadian banks. Around that time, I had bank accounts frozen by some Canadian banks. At the time, they were very, very like shy with Bitcoin stuff. And a bunch of Bitcoin people had their bank accounts shut down in around 2015. So I was like, all right, banks can shut my account down. PayPal can freeze my money. So it's not even a question of, is it more risky for me to hold money in Canadian dollars or with Bitcoin as an investment, right? So it's not the question of like, which one is going to give me the best returns and the highest increase of purchasing power over time. It's a question of which one will I be able to access. And of course, in 2021, Canadians got, you know, a big lesson in that or 2022, when, you know, there was a trucker protest in Canada. I think that was a big red pilling moment for a lot of Canadians, that they were like, the government will never shut down your bank account. That's something that, you know, Russians do, or that's something that China does. It's never going to happen here. It's, you know, but of course it did happen here. So Bitcoin is censorship. So to transact Bitcoin cannot be stopped, but Bitcoin is also seizure resistant. It's a bearer asset. It's kind of like gold, but it's even better than gold, because a lot of people will hold gold because they don't trust the banks and they don't trust the government, and they understand intuitively. A lot of like older people also understand this because they've seen examples of this happening in Europe, and a lot of people are immigrants, and it happened. You know, we were discussing about some of, you know, your story in Croatia. So people, like older people, have seen other countries. People in other countries have their bank accounts seized and stolen for arbitrary reasons. Sometimes governments, they will eliminate a certain note from circulation. You know, sometimes the government will say, all right, the $100 note no longer valid. So if you hold that, it's worth nothing, right? And then you cannot withdraw it from the bank. The bank will just, you know, and if you have it at home, and you try to cash in a $100 note at the bank, you know, you're going to be like, you know, on a list of people who are hoarding $100 notes or something. And this also happened with gold, right? So gold had confiscation in the US, in multiple countries. So if you're holding gold in your house, it's seizure resistant in the sense that if it's not in a bank vault or it's not held at the bank as fiat, the bank cannot arbitrarily seize it. But it's fairly easy for someone to come into your house and steal your gold. And it's fairly easy for the government to knock down your door and seize your gold. And if you're traveling, for example, let's say that you want to move to Paraguay, right? And you have a bunch of gold. try to bring that gold on the airplane to Paraguay, it will for sure get seized. Right. There's like no question. And now there's a rule also where you can't travel with more than $10,000 worth of currency or bearer assets and so on and so forth. But with Bitcoin, it's very different. So a lot of people misunderstand how Bitcoin works. I don't want to get too technical here. Bitcoin is not just an entry in like some cloud. Bitcoin is not just some account held by a Bitcoin bank. And I'm talking here about Bitcoins that you hold yourself, right? Because, and I'm going to make a distinction here. A lot of people, they buy Bitcoin and they leave it on the exchange. The exchange is custodying their Bitcoin. That's exactly the same thing as having money in the bank. And in fact, it's even more dangerous because banks are still more, I think, trustworthy than Bitcoin exchanges. Bitcoin exchanges can seize your Bitcoins, can freeze your accounts, and can run off with your money. So I'm talking here about Bitcoin that you have bought on an exchange and that you have taken possession of in your own Bitcoin wallet. So when you do that, the only way to access those Bitcoins is with the Bitcoin private key that is usually encrypted with a passphrase. So a lot of the time when people, they create a Bitcoin wallet, and we have a bunch of tutorials on our website how to do that. You can create a passphrase so that even if someone finds your phone, even if someone finds your computer, even if someone finds your backup in your house, they cannot seize those Bitcoins without your cooperation. So of course, someone can point a gun to your head and tell you, like, giving your password. The government can put you in jail and tell you, you have to give us your password, but you have to comply and give your password for them to have access. Whereas gold, they'll just come to your house and, if the gold's in the safe, they're going to just break the safe. You cannot break the safe of encryption in Bitcoin. So this Seizure resistant aspect of Bitcoin to me is like one of the major differences with gold, which is that, to get even more like crazy, to access your Bitcoin, you need 12 words. So those 12 words are created by a software called a Bitcoin wallet. And this is how you recover your Bitcoin. So let's say that you have Bitcoin on your phone and you lose your phone. How do you recover those Bitcoins? Well, the kind of like access key to your Bitcoin is actually 12 random words. And it's actually not that difficult to remember 12 words if you really try hard. So technically, you could move from one country to another, not even having the Bitcoin on your phone. You wipe your phone, you wipe your laptop completely. You just remember the 12 words. You move from country A to country B. When you're in country B and you feel safe over there, you pull out your laptop, you pull out your phone, you enter the 12 words into your device, and then the Bitcoins will be regenerated on that new device. So this is, you're able to like almost teleport your wealth without in the time of transportation, it being vulnerable. And this is how banks started. Initially, banks started out as a mechanism for you to store your gold. You would store the gold into the bank. And then if you want to move money from one bank account to another, you don't want to take the gold bars out and like walk in to make a payment. This is how Wells Fargo started out in the West. You're going to, wire transfer the gold, and then the banks will then later settle those big transactions with each other. This is how gold essentially became fiat. But with Bitcoin, you don't have to you don't have to do that. You can actually securely, physically store your wealth and move from one place to another. And that to me is incredibly powerful. And
well, on that point, sorry, Francis, on that point, if you think that my aunt went to jail in Croatia for taking dinars and exchanging them for German marks. So why were people doing that? First of all, because the dinars were losing so much value that people wanted to protect their purchasing power. So they were willing to go to her to try to get some German marks. The communist government at the time finds out she's doing this, puts her in jail for 3 months as punishment for doing this because they don't want people to not use the dinars. They need people to continue to use the dinars. Imagine then if she had Bitcoin or the people that she was interacting with. It could be put into the internet. And with the 12-word example that you're discussing, if she knew the 12 words that she would have for herself to control those Bitcoin, nobody could do anything. And the people wouldn't even need to transact with her because they could get their own Bitcoin. And there wouldn't be this kind of marketplace for like money that doesn't need to happen. People could just store bearer assets themselves. When I hear myself say that, when I hear you say that, I think the most typical Canadians are going to think, okay, these two people are really going off the deep end. Why do you think... Is this a trend in Canada? Like I look at Canada like the old Bell companies, that the financial system here is one of the better ones in the world, quote unquote, better ones. Okay. So most Canadians are like, I don't need to know all this stuff, guys. Like this stuff it's too crazy sounding. But I
Yeah.
feel like there's this technology change happening and they don't see it. And I feel like this decade, they're going to need to know this information. Do you think it's this decade where something kind of happens to the banking system where everyone in Canada is going to need to know this stuff? Like, what's your timeline for the evolution of a drastic monetary change? I'm just curious. I know you don't have a crystal ball.
Definitely this decade, and I'm going to be a little. So I've been saying this for a while, right? When I first got into Bitcoin, I was like, and I understood the monetary system. I was like, there's no way this can last for more than like 3 years. So I was like, I got into Bitcoin in 2013, and then I was like, by 2016 for sure the system's going to collapse, and then by 2019 for sure the system is going to collapse. But with what happened with COVID, and what we're seeing with climate change. So with COVID, what we've witnessed is that the government's power is not limited by any constitutional rule. So this is like, all right. So we thought that there was some kind of barrier to what the governments can do, which is the Canadian Constitution, the Canadian Charter of Rights, the American Constitution. That all went out the window. There is no institution like, there's no legal institution, there's no civil, social institution that will be able to stop or willing to stop what the governments are going to do. So we've established now that the government has unlimited money. We've also established that the government will not print that the government will restrain itself from printing too much money. But we've seen in the US, mostly in 2008 with the real estate crash and with the COVID bubble in 2020, governments are willing to print an infinite amount of money. They have no reserves on that whatsoever. And what we're also seeing is a shift of the climate change hysteria. The COVID hysteria was kind of like short-lived. So that was like a very intense, very short-lived experience of government overreach and central bank overreach. But now we have like the climate change hysteria, which is a long-term kind of like social movement where the governments have an excuse to really crack down on the population, really print a lot of money because they're going to regulate the economy, they're going to kill the economy, and then they're going to need to provide, UBI, universal basic income. They're going to need to provide welfare because everybody's going to be losing their jobs over time because the government's killing the economy in the name of protecting the environment. They are going to need to continuously print money to finance the climate change agenda. There's no way to finance the climate change agenda other than continuously printing money. And unfortunately, there is a large enough social, like democratic movement in favor of this that for sure the governments are going to do it, right? So people want, generally speaking, the masses of people want the government to print money to save the climate. So I think we are at a breaking point where to do what we did with COVID, like another time, would completely kill. So right now, for example, look like, the Canadian Central Bank has increased interest rates. I think it's the largest and fastest increase in rates.
Steepest incline, yes.
Probably
since at least the early 90s, but I think it's beat the early 90s now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And inflation is still going up. So the levers that the central bank was pushing to bring inflation down are not working. So what is their solution? They either need to raise the rates more or to say like, fuck it, we're not going to be able to stop inflation. So let's just continue printing money and let inflation rise anyway. So we're definitely at a breaking point. And so and also for Canadians, right? So I think the Canadian Bitcoin investor, generally speaking, is someone who was before a gold bug, someone who is like an entrepreneur or free market or is a wealth creator generally, someone who is suspicious of the banking system. And overall, what I'm seeing, it's either like very ideologically minded people or wealthy people, right? And not a lot of people are using Bitcoin for transactional terms. They don't need Bitcoin to receive payments in their business. Unless you're doing some kind of like gray market kind of business and you're having a hard time to get into. So people in Canada use Bitcoin, for gambling. It's a very common way to get money to an online casino because they're banned in Canada. But unless you're like in the gray or black markets kind of area, there's no real need to use Bitcoin for transactions because Interac works well, your credit card works well. Yeah, credit cards are a little expensive, but still it's like working relatively well. So in Canada, it's mostly people, they want to preserve their wealth in terms of purchasing power. They want to invest in Bitcoin to make money from Bitcoin, or they want to remove their wealth from the banks, and then they have an alternative between either it's going to be gold or it's going to be Bitcoin. The same kind of people that would remove their bank from the wealth to like invest in real estate, because they'll think like, oh, it's a hard asset, it's not like a flimsy bank account, it's tangible and I can monetize it. But with the communist government that we have in power, do you think that they will lock you in your house and force you to have a vaccine, but they will not take away your home and revoke your property rights? Fuck no. Of course, like your rights. Your rights don't matter, right? They will rent control the shit out of you, and they will seize your house to turn your condo into an immigrant housing project. So it's not censorship resistant at all. You're very, very dependent. Your property rights in real estate are dependent on the government enforcing your property rights. Your property rights in Bitcoin are dependent on cryptography, on math. So in Bitcoin, the property right is self-enforced, whereas in gold, it's determined by your capacity to physically defend your house. Mm-hmm. In Bitcoin, it's mathematical cryptographic security, and in real estate, it's the government will enforce it, because if someone comes into your house to squat your house, how are you going to get that squatter out? If ever, well, you're going to have to get a court order to get that person evicted, because if you try to get into your house and kick out the squatter, you will probably end up in jail, not the squatter. Probably the squatter is probably going to win, some kind of grandfathered right to your property. So in Canada, it's really more about wealth. Here in Costa Rica, people would not believe just how much stuff you can pay for with Bitcoin. Okay, so I share a lot on my Twitter about this concept of paying with Bitcoin in Costa Rica, because it is very widespread. Where I live in an area that we call the Bitcoin jungle, because there's so many people accepting Bitcoin here. There's probably 150 merchants where I can spend Bitcoin. I spend Bitcoin every week on meat, dairy, fruits, veggies. I spend my rent is paid in Bitcoin. I spend Bitcoin on I have a delivery service that delivers groceries to my house that I pay with Bitcoin. Restaurants, I can pay with Bitcoin. Coffee, I can pay with Bitcoin. Surf rentals, I can pay with Bitcoin. It's nuts. I'm like living off of Bitcoin.
I'm surprised it's that many people. Like you're renting surfboards. So this is a circular economy just developing naturally itself.
Well, it developed mostly because, yes, naturally, but there's a lot of expats that are Bitcoiners that came to Costa Rica because they ideologically, like Bitcoiners are, I guess, ideologically inclined to be homesteading and being off the grid and, being self-sustaining kind of types of people. So there was a lot of Bitcoiners in this area and started to preach Bitcoin. And then what happened is the farmers markets, a lot of people, they don't have credit card machines to accept credit card payments. So the farmers markets started to, the vendors at the market started to accept Bitcoin payments.
How did they understand the value of Bitcoin? Was it you going around to some of them trying to explain that this is an asset? Like, how did that happen?
It happened exactly like this. It was kind of like word of mouth. And then once you explain Bitcoin to someone and they get it, they cannot stop themselves from preaching Bitcoin. It's kind of like the mimetic meme viral nature of Bitcoin is that once you really understand it, you become fucking excited. You're like, wow. And then you cannot shut the fuck up about Bitcoin. You talk to Bitcoin about to everyone you know. I'm sure people who fell into the rabbit hole of Bitcoin, they understand this. It's like you become part of and you're excited because finally there is something that is positive and hopeful. Like it's not just doom and gloom. Like normies, I call them normies, people who are just kind of like sleepwalking through life. For them, the world is just like doom and gloom. Like the earth is going to burn and climate change is going to kill everyone. And then there's inequality and racism and there's war and everything sucks. And like, I'm, smoking weed, watching Netflix, ordering takeout and taking antidepressants and everything's shit. And then you discover Bitcoin and you're like, wait a minute, this is like something hopeful I can attach to. It's kind of like, it's kind of like how people used to feel with religion. Religion and God used to be like a source of hope and optimism in your life, and people don't have that anymore. So you find Bitcoin and it kind of becomes your new religion. And it when you get into Bitcoin, it also changes your life. It changes how you value your own time. It changes how you see your wealth. It changes how you conceive of technological progress. It also changes your conception of like what we can accomplish as a people without government. If we remove government, we are able to sustain a global monetary payments transactional network with there's thousands, tens of thousands of businesses there's a whole industry and economy around this, and there is no central entity that is coordinating any of us at all. The protocol just works spontaneously through human voluntary collaboration, and there is no denying that Bitcoin works. You can maybe believe that something else is going to come up one day, or that people will lose interest in Bitcoin, but you cannot deny that it works flawlessly. I prove it by making payments here in Costa Rica, and I also prove it I've been running, BullBitcoin has been a bill payments business, right? So we've been allowing Canadians to pay their bills. I'm sure we're going to get to that eventually, but every single Bitcoin payment that I've ever received from a client was successful. Bitcoin payments do not fail. They're not chargebackable. They're not reversible. To a large degree, they're not traceable. There is no denying that Bitcoin as a payment system works. So far, historically, it also does work as a store of value. Of course, the Bitcoin price is very volatile. So, people will sneer and be like, how's your store of value going? And went from 70 grand to 20 grand or something like that. But it's yeah, but when I first heard about Bitcoin, it was $2. When I first bought into Bitcoin, it was $200, and now it's $50,000. So, if you remove yourself a little bit and you zoom out basically of that chart, it is, on a long enough timeline, it is an effective way to preserve wealth. Time will tell if this continues. I'm obviously 100% confident that it will. So you really, Bitcoin can, there's so many use cases of Bitcoin. People why is anybody going to use Bitcoin? Well, kind of remove yourself from the wealthy Canadian investor type, right? So one of my favorite stories is I was in Costa Rica. I am in Costa Rica, but I was visiting a women's shelter where you have these Nicaraguan immigrant women, mostly, that are victim of domestic abuse and a lot of orphans, and they don't have legal paperwork. They can't work in Costa Rica. They're illegal immigrants. They don't have a social security number. They don't have a passport. They don't have any ID. They're fully off of the system. There's zero way they can ever get paid. They don't have a bank account because they don't have ID. So how can they get a bank account? They don't have an address. And then we hooked them up with a Bitcoin app that allowed them to do online work, basic online work, transcribing podcasts, and little kind of micro tasks, and they could get paid from anywhere on the planet. And then I'm explaining Bitcoin to them, and then they're just not getting it. And one of them raises his hands and is but we can't sign up. I don't have they're telling me what do you not understand? We can't sign up to Bitcoin. We don't have the paperwork. And I'm no, wait. Let me roll it back here. You don't need paperwork to sign up to Bitcoin. All you need is a phone, which costs $60 here, a cheap, cheap Chinese phone, and an internet connection, which is widely available, and then you're good to go. And they're just mind blown. They had never considered the possibility of a contract, of working for a firm, especially not a foreign firm, which is paying them from the United States instantly with the network.
Wow.
So Bitcoin is useful in the context of a first world country, also useful in the context of a third world country, also useful for internet. Okay, so at BullBitcoin, we have all sorts of different clients. One of my clients type, because a lot of people follow me on Twitter because of the COVID stuff and because of the globalism stuff, a lot of people are following my advice, which is get the fuck out of Canada, sell your house, buy Bitcoin, and move to Panama, move to Paraguay, move to Costa Rica, El Salvador, Mexico. Just get the fuck out of Canada and raise your family in a nice, kind of off-grid style of living. People do that. We have a sizable amount of our business is people, they sell their home in Canada, they send the Bitcoin abroad, and then they buy real estate with that Bitcoin abroad. So this is something that actually happens. First world use case. Another first world use case.
And people are accepting the Bitcoin to buy a property in Panama or wherever you see some clients. You're seeing them able to transact, or do they change it into the local currency there? Not that it really matters. I'm just curious on that mechanism.
Typically, they will have to change to the local currency. Okay. I would say about I see ads in Costa Rica. There's definitely a few ads that specifically mention we accept Bitcoin or sure, Tether or something like that. So these exist, but your market is going to be a lot smaller, obviously. But people are usually very able to cash out.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask you. They are able. You have you see people have the mechanism to change Bitcoin to a local currency in a place like Costa Rica. That's easy enough to do.
Yeah. Well, in Costa Rica, I mean, BullBitcoin is also launched in Costa Rica.
That's right. I saw that. Yeah.
For this specific purpose. So the one of the purposes is to kind of like help local adoption of merchants, because here merchants get paid in Bitcoin, and they're able to pay some of their suppliers and staff with Bitcoin, but not all. So they do have to convert to fiat currency to just like pay their supplies and pay their electric bills and rent and so on and so forth. So that's one of the reasons why I launched in Costa Rica, was to help the merchants. But the business but we don't make money from this because it's small amounts, and it's like it's more like a feel good kind of project that we're doing here. But the financial motive behind BullBitcoin coming to Costa Rica is specifically for expats that are trying to buy real estate down here.
Got it.
And receiving wire transfers from abroad is complicated here, and especially it's coming from a Bitcoin exchange. Another use case that people don't talk about or don't think about is we have clients that are doing import-export. So we have clients that are actually exporting goods from Canada to places like Africa. And the buyer in Africa has some shit local African currency that they're not able to find a way to convert to Canadian dollars. And it would be so expensive because they would have to convert.
Impossible. Yeah.
They would have to convert to euros first or dollars first, and they don't have the bank, but they are able to purchase Bitcoin, large amounts of Bitcoin. Like in Nigeria, if you want to purchase Bitcoin, you can use like Binance or some, there's a bunch of also African exchanges there. So you have Canadian entrepreneurs who are exporting goods to Africa, getting paid with Bitcoin. This is a real use case that's happening. And then on the lower end of the scale, you also have people that are getting paid in Costa Rica for micro jobs with Bitcoin that are paid like, I don't know, like $2 an hour with Bitcoin with the Lightning Network. Or you have people that are transacting, farmers that are selling their products to restaurants. The restaurant accepts Bitcoin from the tourists. The restaurant buys the products from the farmer with Bitcoin. The farmer stacks the Bitcoin and holds onto the Bitcoin because the farmer does not have access to financial investment vehicles in Costa Rica. There's like there isn't this culture of like having an investment account at the bank and everybody has a retirement account. If you're a farmer in Costa Rica, you have a bank account to like a checking account, but you don't have an investment account. So people need to realize that. I don't know how many people are using Bitcoin. Like it's possible to figure out. In Canada, I would say like maybe 5% of the population. There's estimates that place it at 15, but I don't believe those. I think it's a little high. I think people maybe like fucking up the surveys or something, but I would say like 5 to 10% of people in Canada had Bitcoin at some point or have or own Bitcoin. But in places like Nigeria or like the Philippines or Thailand, you look at like how many people have used Bitcoin to transact, and it's gonna be like fucking 20%, and it's smaller amounts. And so Bitcoin is obviously still very young. So as an investment, and then the investment thesis of Bitcoin is very simple, right? It's brain dead simple. There's a limited amount of it. You cannot create more. So if the demand for it increases over time, the price will increase. There's no other way. And this is different from and this is how like why people should read the Bitcoin standard to understand like the basic principles of economics. If the demand for gold rises, people will mine more gold. If the demand for Bitcoin rises, you cannot mine more Bitcoin. The Bitcoin mining algorithm is created so that if more people try to mine Bitcoin, long story short, the same amount of Bitcoin will be produced regardless of how many people are trying to mine it. With gold, if the price of gold rises, people will just mine more gold, and then the price of gold will go down. With real estate, if there's demand for real estate increases, well, people will build more houses. There's an infinite amount of land. Like, let's be honest, in Canada, right? So people will just build more houses. And we kind of saw that happening, with the Airbnb rush where, like there was a limited amount of Airbnbs and people wanted to leave the city to go live in an Airbnb because fucking COVID regulations and they want to move to the countryside. So countryside Airbnbs are exploding. What are people doing? They're taking, cheap debt from the bank. They're they're building a house or buying a house in the countryside, renting it out as an Airbnb. But everybody did that. So, the amount of Airbnbs just exploded and the amount of available rentals exploded. But with Bitcoin, like you cannot do that. So what are you speculating about when you're speculating with Bitcoin? Well, there's only there's two speculations to have. One of them is that it will not like get hacked or it will not be destroyed, right? to convince someone that Bitcoin will not get hacked or be destroyed or be taken over by a government. This is usually the worry that, people that are like kind of like in the same mindset, they're like, well, the government will just take it over and stop it.
I feel like we're getting past that point, but yes, agreed. Yeah. Yes, that's a big one. Yes.
It's hard for me to convince someone that this is not possible, because I would have to go into game theory, cryptography, and all of the mechanisms that make Bitcoin an anti-fragile ecosystem. Yes. So if you're familiar with Nassim Taleb, even though he like went off the deep end recently, and if you want to understand Bitcoin, I would suggest philosophically understanding the concept of anti-fragility, which is kind of like an immune system where if it's attacked, it develops antibodies and becomes more robust. This is how Bitcoin works. And just trust me on this, Bitcoin will not go down or be hacked. Bitcoin exchanges could be banned by government. So a company like BullBitcoin can be banned by a government, and then you would have difficulty buying Bitcoin or exchanging Bitcoin to fiat.
But you would still have the Bitcoin you have in your custody. Yes.
You would still have the Bitcoin you have. And then it's kind of like, the government banned marijuana, but you can still buy marijuana.
So on this point, I think you're bringing up a huge point, because someone like me in 2017, I'll never forget when the AV guy at one of our events turned to me and he said, "Hey, Tom, are you buying some Bitcoin?" And I kind of laughed at him. Like I literally this Bitcoin thing. And I remember after 2017, I guess it was 2018 or 2000, halfway through 2018, I looked at the Bitcoin price by some random chance, and I expected it to be zero. I expected the price of Bitcoin to be zero. And I'll never forget the moment I checked the Bitcoin price. And I think at the time it was maybe $6,000 or so, something like that. And it stunned me. It stunned me. I still didn't buy any, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like I thought it was the tulip bubble. Like it went up like crazy. And obviously everybody knows now it's destroyed. It's nothing. How is this thing still sitting at 6,000? And that was my first moment where I felt like it was anti-fragile. That was for me, the first moment, like, well, I still didn't do anything, which, was silly, but it was the first moment that I thought this thing won't die.
So there's like 19 point something million Bitcoins that have been created already out of 21 million. It's estimated that, I mean, these are all estimations and speculations. We can't know, but it's estimated that about 3 million Bitcoin have been lost forever. Like early people in Bitcoin, they didn't value it that much. They had a backup of it on their hard drive, and they lost a hard drive, and they didn't give a fuck because they had 1,000 Bitcoins and Bitcoin was worth like 1 cent. So, they have $10 worth, $1 worth of Bitcoin. They didn't give a shit. So it's estimated that like, 3 million Bitcoins have been lost. And like, the original people that built Bitcoin, they haven't touched their Bitcoins ever. So it's kind of like, if you haven't touched, millions of Bitcoins since 2009, the chance that, so there's like 4 million Bitcoin are like off the market. You have 15 million Bitcoin left. I don't know the numbers exactly, but I think it's something like around 3 million Bitcoins are liquid. So there's only like a small portion of the Bitcoins that are being bought and sold on the exchange. So I have this joke that I posted on Twitter, and it's a very telling joke. It's Bitcoin, and I say Bitcoin will never go to zero because I will buy all of the Bitcoin at 1 cent just for sentimental value. Just out of principle, I will buy them all at 1 cent. And someone replies to my tweet and says, well, I will buy them at 2 cents.
2 cents.
And at 3 cents. And then, so you have like a layer of people that we call hodlers that will not sell Bitcoin no matter what. There is a hardcore of Bitcoin believers, and it's not like 100 of my friends and I. We're talking about millions of people. Like, I've been in Bitcoin for 10 years. I go to
growing.
Bitcoin conferences. Oh, it's nuts. And like, you meet a Bitcoiner from Germany, from Japan, from Seoul, from Latin America, and they're like into the Bitcoin culture, and they're like, I'm never selling. I'm just so that creates like a price floor. And because of the viral aspect, like the Bitcoin cycles, they create like a news cycle and an interest cycle. And then usually the kind of like typical psychology is someone was interested in Bitcoin and they were like, it's a scam or blah, blah, blah. And then they forget about it. And then they look up later and then now it's 20 grand and they're like, what the fuck? And then it drops down to like 4 grand and then they buy in. And then the next time it drops, they just won't sell. Like, it's kind of like a one-way street. Like once you become a Bitcoiner, it's very, very rare that I talk to someone and they're like, I used to be a Bitcoiner, but now I'm not a Bitcoiner anymore. Like that like never happened, you know?
No.
First you buy Bitcoin because you think the price is going to go up and you're going to be rich. Then you start, you know, following Bitcoin Twitter and following Bitcoin podcasts and Bitcoin YouTube. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm part of a revolution here. And then, you know, you get attracted by, you know, there's a meme in Bitcoin called number go up. You know, you get attracted by the price of Bitcoin going up, and then you fall into the ideology of Bitcoin and you understand like this wealth that I have cannot be seized. So if I sell my Bitcoin for fiat, and fiat in the bank can just be frozen and seized and devalued, like why would I do that? There's no real point. And you know, if Bitcoin is also very private, you know, relatively speaking. So if you acquire Bitcoin and then you sell Bitcoin, you know, the wealth that you have that's private that very few people know about now becomes known wealth. So there's like a disincentive for people to sell Bitcoin, and people also don't want to pay capital gains tax on their Bitcoin. So it's kind of funny because they buy Bitcoin and then they will hold because they don't want to pay the capital gains tax. So that all of these phenomenon create a floor, and this floor is always kind of like rising. Like this floor is never decreasing. And we see that also. There's like, because the Bitcoin blockchain, all the transactions are public. They're like anonymous, but you can still see the like, you know, which coins are going to which address. And what we see is that like, there's moments where like 95% of the Bitcoins that have not moved like in the last year or something, or the last 2 years, like you can see that, all right, there's like a good chunk of Bitcoin that are not moving. And there's a small chunk of Bitcoin that's like always kind of like being traded back and forth. And these are usually like the coins that are held by exchanges and by day traders and people who are buying and selling. So there's like this floor. So will Bitcoin go to zero? Like, honestly, at this point, like people are so ideologically attached to Bitcoin that people like me, and there's a lot of us, like would rather go down with the ship. And the ship will not go down, but you know,
I'm in the same camp. I'm in the same camp. So yeah, and I came much later than you, and I'm in that camp. You know, and you said something really interesting right there. You said, you know, Bitcoin is still relatively young. If I look back, it's these technology trends that I can't shake out of my brain. Like in 1998, the internet first. You're much younger than me, Francis. So I don't know. Maybe you weren't even born in 1998. But in 1998, the internet was very young, but it started to become useful to me. 1998. Okay, that's when it really started becoming useful. Email was really starting. AOL was popular, all these things. And then in 2005, when I went and I left Oracle, a database company, to go to a company called NetSuite that was doing accounting in the cloud. Okay. So what's that? That's 7 years later. People still said in 2005, Tom, you are crazy. Nobody is going to put their accounting information, the lifeblood of their company, into the internet in 2005. In 2007, 24 months later, NetSuite goes public for $1 billion on the New York Stock Exchange. So to me, the technology trend from 1998 to 2005, 7 years, it was slow. People didn't see it. But NetSuite was building. I think it started in 2003, 2004, started building. The last 2 years, it goes from people in 2005 telling me at Oracle, a tech company, my managers there telling me, don't go to NetSuite. Nobody is going to put their information into the internet. To 24 months later, NetSuite goes from an average sale. We were selling stuff in 2005 for about $1,000 to small companies. By the time I left in 2007, the average sale had gone to like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. My friends who stayed after I quit to start this company, the average sale went to $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. In that last 24 months, it went from no one's going to do this to everybody is doing this. And I just feel when I watch Bitcoin, if 2017 was like, to me, the big awareness moment, I know for you, it might've been much earlier, but that's when I first started really hearing about it. And then 2020, it kind of took another maturation step, because in 2020, it was like a whole bunch of more mainstream people, to me, jumped onto the Bitcoin bandwagon. I feel now like the growth could be like, oh my gosh, in 2 years from now, where are we going to be? When I see what BullBitcoin's doing, like I had no idea BullBitcoin was doing payments. And I'd been in this for years already. That was all new to me this year. I had no clue. As that stuff starts getting out into the population, I feel like the usage of it is really going to ramp forward, and people don't see it. Francis, I want to be respectful of your time.
I'm good. I want to touch on to something about how early we are.
Okay, and then we got to talk about BullBitcoin because I want everyone to know about what you're doing because it's important.
Yeah.
Like you're building this kind of like life raft. I need everyone to know about it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. One last point on how early we are. So, have you heard about the Yellowstone series on Netflix or on?
Yes.
Okay. So
I'm pretty sure my brother bought his pickup truck because of that TV show.
Right.
Okay. He won't admit that. He won't admit that, but I'm pretty sure that's.
You know, imagine you're like a settler in New America and it's like the 1600s and basically like 1% of America is populated. It's like Manhattan or Boston or something. And you have like this vast expanse out west, you know, and people start to go out west and you're like, why the fuck are you going out west to claim land? It's fucking dangerous. You're going to be eaten by a grizzly bear. There's like Indians that are kill you. There's bandits everywhere. And like, nobody's ever going to live over there. Like nobody's ever going to live in California. Nobody's ever going to live in the Rockies in Wyoming or in Colorado or in Montana. That's crazy. Like, but you know, you go there and you claim like 100,000 acres of land in California. Like how much is that worth today? Like billions of dollars. So basically you have to think of like, this is kind of like the frontier phase of Bitcoin where the people who are getting into Bitcoin now are the most risk, what's the opposite of risk averse? That are willing to take the most risk. I don't see it as risky, but I can see why
someone can be perceived as that way. Yes.
Yeah, I could totally see. So it takes someone that is willing to take risks or that is ideologically motivated or that has a day-to-day incentive, like they have nothing else to lose, basically. Same as the movement out west to get into Bitcoin. But the more people get into Bitcoin, the safer it becomes for the other followers, right? Because you have the trailblazer, they're going into like the middle of nowhere, and then someone, you know, opens up, you know, a general store and then a hotel, and then it becomes a little town. And then once there's a little town, it becomes a lot safer. So people start to get into that town. It becomes a big city. And this is kind of like how Bitcoin works because, you know, we need to build wallets, hardware wallets, security infrastructure, exchanges, inheritance services, privacy services. So like all of these things are being built by like early settlers, and all of these are making Bitcoin less risky and removing the risk and augmenting the value proposition of Bitcoin. And this makes it a lot more attractive for the less for the risk averse people to follow. And I would direct the listeners to read an article called Hyperbitcoinization, HYPER Bitcoinization. And this theory basically states, and hold on, I'm going to actually change rooms and plug my phone in. So my internet might cut out for a second there.
No problem.
I'm running out of battery and we are not done with this episode. Hold on. If it cuts out, I'll just refresh.
No, we're good. You take your time.
Excellent. Okay. So the theory of hyperbitcoinization, I'm going to summarize it. Can you hear me? Am I still on?
Yeah, we're good. Okay, we're good.
It's basically that there is a snowball effect. The Bitcoin adoption will not be linear. It will not be peaceful. It will not be it's not going to be an easy, peaceful transition to like a Bitcoin economy. Right now, we are in the early phase. And then at some point, there's also another concept called speculative attack. People are going to borrow fiat money to purchase Bitcoin. They're going to exchange in mass the bad money for the good money. And then this is going to make the price of Bitcoin go up. And as the price of Bitcoin goes up, people don't want to miss out. So they start borrowing fiat money to purchase Bitcoin. This is something that we're seeing now, and it's going to bankrupt I think it's going to bankrupt the banking system, like because the Bitcoins that people are buying with the fiat money cannot be seized. So hyper-Bitcoinization is kind of like the term which describe a moment in which Bitcoin adoption starts to like rapidly increase. It's kind of like you can imagine like an S-curve shape where it starts off very slow, and then at some point something happens, and you know, it's going to be a catalytic event that makes it happen. This might be like a major crisis, for example, in Europe, right? Or a major takedown of the euro. This might be a major political event in the United States. This might be, you know, the installation of a central bank digital currency, and that locks people out of their funds and creates a panic. this can be kind of like a bank run type event, but it's kind of like the opposite of a bank run, where instead of running to withdraw your cash from the bank because you're afraid that, you know, the cash is going to run out before you're able to withdraw it, you're going to run to Bitcoin because you're afraid that Bitcoin will no longer be accessible if you don't do it now. So we're very, very early. And like, you know, you see something like, all right, Bitcoin is at 5% of people own Bitcoin, or say 10% of people own Bitcoin. And then you might think, oh, so Bitcoin only has 10 times more to go, you know? So, you know, if it's 30 grand now, it can only go to 300,000 because there's already 10% of the people that have Bitcoin. That's not true, because those 10% of people that own Bitcoin, how many have all of their wealth in Bitcoin? Very, very little amount. Like people that have put all of their wealth into Bitcoin, that's probably,
oh geez, yeah, small amount. Yes,
let's say like 0.5 to 1% of Canadians have like most of their wealth in Bitcoin. Probably 0.1 of them are like crazy, like me and my buddies. You know, my hardcore Bitcoin buddies have like 100% of their wealth in Bitcoin, and you know they're like borrowing money to buy more Bitcoin, and they're selling their kidneys to buy Bitcoin. You know, that's like a very small percent of the population. So there's definitely a lot more to go, and the technology of Bitcoin has also not been ready for prime time for a long time. And right now, just in terms of technology, we are at an inflection point where the new technologies that allow Bitcoin to be secured, to be passed down to next, like inheritance planning, is like a huge business in Bitcoin. Because it was a hard problem.
You're seeing the technology start to match the needs of the users, because that's what I was going to ask you. For hyperbitcoinization to happen, the technology needs to exist for people to flow into it. So you're seeing that?
Yeah, I would say that technologically speaking, we have 5 years left to go, technologically speaking, before I would be comfortable to be like, all right, Bitcoin can handle like 2 billion or like 1 billion people, right? So right now, I think Bitcoin probably has, you know, I think we have like a few years left to build technology to like withstand a horde of people, but they will come regardless of whether the technology is ready or not. But like in my like ideal scenario, like we're kind of like 5 years away technology, and it's been what so far 14 years. So we're kind of like very close to technological maturity. Like Bitcoin is safe and easy to use right now, but there are still some issues, such as inheritance planning is one, and like to be able to, for businesses to be able to use as an individual with your own like Bitcoin wallet, that's like relatively easy to handle. If you're a business and you have many people that need to have access to the Bitcoin for daily payments,
that's fair. Yes,
you need to like build tools to. It's kind of like a treasury management tools, like they're being built. But it's happening soon, and like the Bitcoin's innovation space is just insane and very, very busy. For people that are into technology, it's mind blowing. And because all of these technologies are open source, so collaborative internet technologies that don't have proprietary IP, contrary to like web technologies, which were closed source in the beginning, there's a compounding effect where if someone builds a technology, someone can take that technology and build another technology on top of that, and someone else will take that technology and build on top of that. So it's kind of like the intellectual property pool of Bitcoin is just this kind of like commons pool, which grows like exponentially. So it's very fascinating and definitely not boring. Like I work at BullBitcoin. Now we can switch talking about BullBitcoin a little bit. BullBitcoin is a Bitcoin exchange business. We were founded in 2013. BullBitcoin itself, the company was founded in 2015, but in 2016, I acquired a business that was launched in 2013. And this business was called Bills, BYLLS.
Oh, and that's how that's into. Got it. Okay. I didn't understand the connection. Now I get it. Yeah. Okay.
So Bills was the world's first bill payment business that was based out of Montreal. It was founded by a friend of mine. And it allowed Canadians to send Bitcoin to the app. And as soon as you send Bitcoin to the app, the exchange rate is locked and a fiat bank payment is initiated to whichever recipient you specified. And usually that's sent to the recipient like within the next day or the same day. So imagine you want to pay your hydro bill. You go on the website, you select the biller. There's like a list of like 14,000 billers in Canada.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, it's crazy, man. There's so many billers in Canada. It's like, there's the weirdest shit. A lot of it is like municipal taxes and water and of every town in Canada. And there's all the internet bills.
But so if I have Bitcoin, I don't have to go through my bank. I can go through BullBitcoin and say, pay this bill. It'll sell my Bitcoin, transact it in fiat dollars, change it into fiat dollars, and pay the bill on my behalf. So I don't have to go through the Canadian banking system.
Exactly. So, and then once you've sent the Bitcoin, you don't have to do anything else. Like you literally just say, I want this bill to be paid this amount. You send the Bitcoin and it's done. Like we will convert it. We will send it to the recipient and will not be tied to your bank account. And you can also do that with e-transfer, right? So you write the e-transfer email address of the recipient. You sell the Bitcoin, we send the e-transfer to the recipient. You can do that with bank wires. You can do that with
so that e-transfer. Is that like any other Canadian Interac e-transfer? Is it that kind of thing? Like the recipient, what are they seeing if I sell it that way through BullBitcoin and I want to send somebody 100 Canadian dollars and I say, okay, sell this much Bitcoin. So here's the email address I need to send somebody money to. They get it like what, an Interac email kind of thing?
They get an Interac email from BullBitcoin.
So they can deposit it into their RBC account or their BMO account or something. That's just wild. That's completely wild.
And that is not tied to or it coming from your bank account. It's coming from BullBitcoin's bank account. In the case of bills, like a credit card. So our most popular bill is credit card. So people that have a lot of Bitcoin or that are getting paid in Bitcoin or so people that have Bitcoin are getting paid in Bitcoin. Typically what they will do to like cash out their Bitcoin is they're going to rack up their credit card or credit cards. And when the price of Bitcoin goes up, they will pay off their credit card debt. That's
it. Yeah. I never thought of that.
A very common usage of BullBitcoin is this. People also pay like their monthly hydro bill, stuff like that. You know, we have Bitcoin miners that are paying hydro bills that are like $10,000 a month. We got businesses, and you can also pay like your staff in direct deposit. So we do have businesses that are paying their staff with Bitcoin. So, you know, you're an online business, you get paid with Bitcoin, but you have a contractor in Canada that doesn't accept Bitcoin. We have all sorts of
this is blowing my mind a little bit. I know people who are mining Bitcoin, so they can mine the Bitcoin and then through your service, they could really just pay anybody, mine the Bitcoin and they pay anybody. That's kind of wild.
We have all sorts of fun use cases. Like we have a bunch of tuition payments that are coming from overseas. So, you know, you have like a student.
Oh yeah. Got it.
From whatever country. And then his parents don't want to send him a wire to his bank account because he's going to spend it all. So the student gives his bills to the parents pay the bills with Bitcoin. So that's like a really cool use case. And then on the other side, we have the buy Bitcoin. So people can sell Bitcoin. They can send to their own bank account or to someone else. So when you send to someone else, we call it a bill payment. And when you sell to your own bank account, obviously, if you want to, you know, choose yourself as a recipient, you can do that.
Sure.
And then on the other side, we have the buy Bitcoin service. And then I'll get to like how BullBitcoin is different just after I described it. So the buy Bitcoin service, there's really three kind of like types of buyers. One of them is like, we have kind of a prime service for high net worth and VIP kind of individuals. So that is our bread and butter, actually. So a lot of people know us in BullBitcoin because we're very vocal in the Bitcoin community and we like have like a large base of followers, but we like our business is not to like have a lot of people that are making small transactions. Like that's kind of like, you know, one of our competitors, ShakePay, they really specialize in like these little small amounts. Like we specialize in like people that want to buy a large amount of Bitcoin and that need like hands-on advisory services. One of the reasons why we're so good at this is because we don't have slippage, right? We're an OTC brokerage. So if you buy, you know, $5 million worth versus like, you know, $100 on an order book based trading platform, if you make a big purchase at one time, you're going to get wrecked by slippage. BullBitcoins is different. It's like there's a fixed price and regardless of the amount. And we do this because we are connected to multiple order book exchanges and we do arbitrage and we have a trading engine in the back end. So if someone wants to buy a large amount of Bitcoin, there's no slippage.
And for that service, they're speaking to somebody on the phone at BullBitcoin, I would imagine. And what would be, I know this could always change, what would be the minimum for somebody to use that service, just to paint the picture for someone? I know it always changes. So if just a rough dollar amount.
To be honest, like someone could literally do that, and you know, if they wanted to buy like $1,000 and they gave us a call, we probably wouldn't turn them down. But we try to like keep like a large amount for us is like $10,000 or more.
Yeah, got it.
You know, and then the maximum amount you can do is like I mean, there technically is no maximum. There's probably one point where we would be like, listen, like, we're not going to make money on this trade because the slippage is so high. Let's say you want to buy $100 million worth of Bitcoin. Like we cannot do that. You cannot smash buy 100 million. Probably if you're like buying like 5 million or more, we would probably space it out like at least like 2 or 3 trades during one day or a couple of days or something like that. But you know, anything under 5 million, you probably just like click a button and then just smash buy. And then the particularity of Bull Bitcoin has like 3 particularities. One of them, which is my greatest pride and joy, and this may not matter to the investor, but all of our technology at Bull Bitcoin is developed in-house. Our Bitcoin wallets are developed in-house that we use in the back end. We don't use any third-party providers. We're not, a lot of exchanges, they're just like reselling third-party providers. So, you know, you think you're using an exchange, but actually that exchange that you're using is just a marketing website over another exchange. So we use our own technology. Everything is open source and built in-house. Our technology is built specifically so that it respects the privacy of Bitcoin users. I'm not going to go into too many details, but Bitcoin transactions are traceable on the blockchain, and Bull Bitcoin employs a lot of energy, a lot of software to protect our users from having their transactions easily tracked and traced on the Bitcoin blockchain. And we are accepting, like we integrated Lightning Network, Liquid Network, all sorts of very cool technologies. This doesn't really matter to the average user, but it makes Bull Bitcoin resilient to something like an FTX type collapse or like BlockFi. So when you see like these exchanges that are like getting hacked or getting that are dependent on another wallet that gets hacked, this stuff cannot happen to Bull Bitcoin. The other thing, Bull Bitcoin is a Bitcoin only exchange. So we do not sell securities. We do not sell investments. We do not offer yield. We do not offer any shitcoin whatsoever. When you go on Bull Bitcoin, there's only one thing you can buy, and that's Bitcoin. You can smash buy any amount of Bitcoin that you want. We also offer a really cool dollar cost averaging service, which is very popular, which is that, let's say like you don't know when is the right time to buy Bitcoins. Obviously, one of the most common questions we get in our support chat is like, hey guys, like, is it a good time to buy? Obviously, we don't know. So if you don't know, well, you can close your eyes and just buy it now and just not care about it. I actually think that's a decent thing to do. You know, it's like, just fuck it. Just, you know, you have like 100 grand, you want to invest in Bitcoin, just close your eyes, buy it now and just stop thinking about it. But what happens if the price of Bitcoin drops by like 20% the next day? You know, you missed out on 20% more Bitcoin. So you can do dollar cost averaging, which is you can program a buy Bitcoin schedule. Let's say like, you know, you have 100 grand to invest. All right, I'm going to buy like $1,000 a day for 100 days. So that way my buy-in price of Bitcoin will effectively be the weighted average of those last 100 days. So that's a really, really cool feature that we have. And the other particularity with Bull Bitcoin is that we are a non-custodial exchange. This makes Bull Bitcoin the best Bitcoin business in the world. Also makes Bull Bitcoin harder to use than a traditional exchange. That is unavoidable. We are working on technologies to make it always easier for the user. So what does this mean? So typically when you're buying Bitcoin on a regular exchange, you buy the Bitcoin and it goes into your exchange account. And then the exchange owns the Bitcoin. Like you don't own the Bitcoin, you own a claim to a certain Bitcoin amount, which is held by someone else. Kind of like, you know, having gold in a bank vault versus having gold in your own vault, right?
Yeah, because if something then happens to the exchange, either the government issues something or the exchange itself does something incorrect, you don't have your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You're saying you guys are different than that.
Yeah. Yeah. So if the exchange gets hacked, not Bull, if another exchange gets hacked, you're fucked. And you will never get your Bitcoin back. You might think that the exchange has insurance. You might think that you can sue them and get your money back. You will not. You will get 1 penny on the dollar at maximum. With Bull Bitcoin, when you buy Bitcoin, you need to first, before you even buy Bitcoin, you need to have your own Bitcoin wallet, right? So you need to download an app on your phone, or you need to download software on your laptop,
or you need to buy a hardware wallet and install it. So this makes BullBitcoin a little bit more difficult because it requires you to take physical possession of the Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
When you click buy Bitcoin on BullBitcoin, we send the Bitcoin to the address that you specified right away. We are never in possession of your Bitcoin. We're not custodians. We will not take responsibility. It is your responsibility. And the reason why we did that is twofold. First of all, it's ideological. We want people to have no other choice than to take responsibility and possession of their Bitcoin. And the other one is, I don't want BullBitcoin to be a target for hackers. I don't want to receive a court order asking me to freeze someone else's Bitcoin. I don't want that responsibility. I want to sleep well at night.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know that whatever I do, I cannot compromise your money. If BullBitcoin gets hacked, we lose our money, not your money. If BullBitcoin gets shut down by the government, we will lose our own money, not your money. That's very, very important to us. So that's why there's like a little friction associated with
I have seen it. I got to admit, though, I have seen new people, maybe they're younger, but I have seen them, and I don't know if you're going to agree with this, download the Blue Wallet onto their phone. They're new. I've seen them go to BullBitcoin. I've seen them do a non-KYC deposit at Canada Post with a small amount and get the Bitcoin sent to their Blue Wallet on their phone. So they're custodying themselves all through BullBitcoin all in one day. Like all in one afternoon. So I know there is a bit of friction for sure, but I have seen people, and I don't know if it's the younger generation or what, but I have seen people move pretty quick.
So we have like most of our big clients are like over 50 years old, specifically because we specialize in high net worth individuals, and like, you know, high net worth individuals are like typically older, you know? So I'm like, we have a saying at BullBitcoin internally, it's nobody left behind. So your grandmother is able to download a Bitcoin wallet. Anybody is able to download a Bitcoin wallet. Arguably, using Bitcoin is just as easy as using email. Like, what we want to make sure of is that people have backed up their Bitcoin wallet in case they lose it. So getting into Bitcoin with BullBitcoin is really easy. You download the Blue Wallet app, you copy and paste the address, you buy, it goes to your phone, it's fine. But like, we want to make sure that people back up their wallet, and backing up their wallet, it is actually easy, right? It's like you write down your 12 secret words that we were talking about at the beginning of the show on a piece of paper, and then you hide that under your bed. And then, you know, maybe you add an encryption password on top of it, and then that's it. You're safe forever. No, it's really, really easy. It's just that people have this like fear of taking ownership of their own money, because they think that if the exchange is taking care of their own money, then it's not their responsibility, it's someone else's responsibility, and they'll be fine. But overwhelmingly, people lose their Bitcoin overwhelmingly because they left it on an exchange and the exchange got hacked. And I'm talking about like 90%, 95% of any person you ever talk to that lost Bitcoin, you ask them, how did you lose your Bitcoin? Oh, my exchange got hacked. Or my exchange account got hacked. Right? Because like your Bitcoin wallet on your phone, I'm going to say this with like a little grain of salt, cannot be hacked. It is exceedingly difficult, insurmountable difficulty almost, for some hacker in China or in Russia or anywhere to like gain remote control to your phone and hack your phone wallet and get the Bitcoins from your own wallet. That does not happen. You never hear about that. What the hacker can do is hack your exchange account by, for example, SIM swapping your phone, by sending you a phishing link that you click a phishing link, and then they gain access to your exchange account, and then you drain your exchange account. So you think your coins are safe on an exchange? They're not. You've outsourced responsibility to someone which is incompetent, because most Bitcoin exchanges are very incompetent people. Like BullBitcoin, I think, is one of the very few competent exchanges on the planet, like technologically, security-wise competent.
Listen, Francis, I just want to say something to anyone listening. I've used a bunch of exchanges here in Canada. I love what you guys are doing so much. I feel blessed and honored that you're here today with us. I feel blessed that you're also building this for Canadians, because I feel like it's a bit of a life raft that you're offering people.
It is,
and I want everyone to know about BullBitcoin. From what I see, it is the very best way to purchase Bitcoin in Canada. I know you have high net worth options, but I've seen people buy small amounts on daily cost averaging. what you've built, I'm thrilled with. What I heard you talk about at the Bitcoin conference, I don't know if your mobile functionality is coming out later this year. That's something you're working on, but I remember that just completely blowing my mind.
Yeah.
So just what you guys are doing,
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan, and I just want to thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, so we are coming out with a mobile app. So one of the big downsides of BullBitcoin is that it's a web app only right now. You can use it on your phone, but it's not a mobile app. And we are coming up with a mobile app that includes a Bitcoin wallet. So for someone who does not know anything about Bitcoin, they just download the BullBitcoin app. They click buy, they send an indirect transfer, wire transfer, or they go to Canada Post. And with BullBitcoin, by the way, we didn't talk about this, but as you mentioned briefly, we have an option where you can buy Bitcoin with cash or with a debit card at any post office in Canada. And if you stick under $1,000 a day in transaction, you don't have to give ID or you don't have to identify yourself. So we have an option which respects your privacy, but only for small amounts. If you're investing a large amount of Bitcoin, we don't have a choice. We need to get your ID and log you into our records and all of that. That's just Canadian regulations. But yeah, we are coming out with this app. I honestly think, in all humility, that when this app comes out, and we've been building it for about a year and a half, it's a very technologically advanced piece of software. So it's not just like any exchange app. It's a lot. It goes a lot more deep than that. So I'm hoping December or January it will be out. I'm confident that it will be the best Bitcoin app ever built in any country. I'm very confident that this is the case. And also, for those who are interested, like BullBitcoin has been Canada only for the last 10 years, but we are finally expanding internationally. So we launched in Costa Rica like a month ago. We're hoping to launch in Europe later this year.
Oh,
Mexico, wow. Yeah, Mexico as well. So it's Costa Rica, Mexico, Brazil, Europe are all on including the UK, are all on the roadmap. The USA will never be on our roadmap. Doing Bitcoin business in the USA is incredibly difficult because of American regulations. So we're not going to touch that, but hopefully Australia and some countries in Asia are going to be next. So, and I want in India as well. I'm looking at doing a remittance option for Indians that are in Canada that are sending money to India. Long story short, the price of Bitcoin in India is much higher than the price of Bitcoin in Canada because of India's capital controls. The price of Bitcoin in India is like 5% to 10% higher to buy. So if you buy Bitcoin in Canada and you send it to India and you sell it in India, instead of paying money to send money to India, you're actually going to be making more money. Yeah, you're going to be gaining. So I'm hoping to be able to allow Canadians to send money to India and actually make money on this. So we're expanding and we're not going anywhere. So, keep following our work. But like the BullBitcoin that people know and love is about to get a massive upgrade. And I'm just so excited to share that later this year with everybody in Canada.
You're part of that technology progression that I was talking about earlier. You're part of that. So it's super exciting for me to watch you. Like, just know that there's people on the sidelines cheering you on that maybe you don't see every day, but we are,
And that's like what keeps me going. 70 hours a week working on this thing is that, like, I know that people really value, because BullBitcoin is a business, and our primary objective is to make profits. So BullBitcoin makes a profit on the exchange rate spread. It's kind of like a currency exchange at the airport. We have a buy price that's higher than the sell price. So we make money off of our clients, obviously, but like we're also like almost like an activist group. We're very
I
political.
Can tell, yeah.
We have a very outspoken political agenda, which is to eliminate the state and eliminate central banks, or reduce the size of the state to its bare minimum, which I would say is probably just like courts and police and army. Our explicit mandate is to destroy all central bank, destroy fiat currency, and also to protect and preserve the cypherpunk or like anarchist or crypto anarchist roots of Bitcoin, which is to preserve privacy of the users, keep the Bitcoin network decentralized, and keep Bitcoin secure and resistant to government attacks. So people in the kind of like libertarian, anti-establishment crowd, they understand that BullBitcoin has a social mission, which is to reduce the size of government and eliminate central banking. And people in the Bitcoin crowd also have an understanding that we are creating technology that helps protect Bitcoin and helps protect Bitcoin users. And like, whenever I leave my jungle hideout and I go to a Bitcoin conference, everybody's just telling me that they're so grateful about, it's kind of like, people consider BullBitcoin like a sports team almost. They're like cheering for BullBitcoin and they want BullBitcoin to succeed. And we have an incredible amount of volunteers that are just always helping out. We're very grateful for that. And it's just a reminder that like people want what we have to offer. And it's not just the product. Like there is a huge demand.
Yeah, people want their sovereignty back. People want their sovereignty back. And I mentioned briefly, we have an event on October 14th. Yeah. We're proud to have you guys there. I know two guys from BullBitcoin, Matt and Pouliot, are going to be there. And I'm thrilled. Like, you have no idea. This is very meaningful for me personally. So maybe it's a selfish move, Francis, but it's very meaningful for me personally to have BullBitcoin there. So, And
what will happen is for people who attend, like what you can expect is go talk to the two BullBitcoin guys that are going to be. I think we're going to have a booth, or we're going to have some presence. Go talk to them, and how it's going to work. If you're new to Bitcoin, you're going to schedule a phone call, and probably the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to help you over the phone set up with the Bitcoin wallet. Maybe if you want to buy our hardware, like a physical security device, we're going to buy it for you and ship it to you. And then we're going to help you install it. And then once we feel confident that, okay, you have your own wallet, you have a backup, you understand what you're doing, you'll basically have like an accounts guy and a technical guy that it will set you up with the wallet. And then, we'll help you make your first purchases. And then from that point on, you're probably going to be able to do it. You're on your own. But like the experience that you're going to have is you're going to be talking with someone over the phone with a Zoom call. And you're not going to be on your own. Like, you're always going to have someone that's kind of like holding your hand. I guess, and it's kind of like in the same philosophy that, you guys are doing with Rockstar. Like, if you have any questions about, inheritance, accounting, all sorts of things, we'll point you to the right expert. We'll send you the right reading materials. And, if you need to get on the call, it's not like a 24-hour phone line, but you can always book like a Zoom meeting. And we literally have we have a kind of call center that's very different also than other exchanges. It's not a support system, ticket system. It's like we have a call center, we book phone calls and we look at your face and
to someone.
Yeah, you can speak to someone. Yeah,
Francis, I need to wrap because I need to go in a second. But man, thank you for anything else you want to share before we wrap here?
No,
thank
that's
you
great.
for this.
I had a lot of fun on the interview, and thank you so much for your time. And look forward to meeting all of your clients and your fans, and well, not me, but my team in Toronto. When is it again? It's
Saturday, 14th. October 14th.
Oh, 14th. That's right.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm going to be bugging you again because you don't know this. When the mobile app comes out, I know you're going to be busy, but I'm going to be bugging you to come back and share everybody with what's going on. So yeah, thank you, Francis. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Term show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.